Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Damian Bunday, also known as Buds with Nick. You may have seen my previous videos when I come to Web3, gaming, and any other kind of variety stuff that I just like to point the camera and just record. But anyway, today I have a very special guest. I am here with Chris Melissinos, the Principle Evangelist over at AWS Games. Chris, thank you for stopping on by in the virtual gaming world with me.
Of course, buddy. My pleasure. My pleasure.
So let's get off with just who you are and how you got into gaming.
Yeah. So, been at AWS now for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years next month. Working as a principal evangelist here, but I've had a long career in the games industry and the technology industry in general. Going all the way back, I first started programming when I was 9 years old. I wrote my first game when I was 12, all self-taught, all that kind of stuff. And back in that era, you used magazines and you used, paper printouts that you would take to your friends or take to a teacher and say, how do I fix this kind of stuff? So I've been, around technology for my whole life. But my professional career, I started at Sun Microsystems in 1994. Some of you may know Sun because of Java, right? The inventor of Java, as well as, the fact that Sun was also powering about 90% of the world's internet traffic in 2000, 2001. And it's suffice to say, without Sun Microsystems, there would be no internet, kind of the way we know it today. But I worked in a variety of different capacities there. And then eventually, I wrote a business plan and an opportunity around game development in Java for the company. Spent a couple of years kind of socializing, didn't get anywhere. And so finally, I just went right to the CEO and was like, why aren't we doing this? And he said, yeah, why aren't we doing this? Come on over and do that. So I led the game technologies group at Sun. We built Java APIs and game technologies that powered everything from the original Madden online environment to, the API stack that games like Minecraft and RuneScape and Puzzle Pirates, were built on. Left that company after 16 years, went out and did some consulting work on this side and a variety of different things. And at that time, I was commissioned by the Smithsonian American Art Museum to build the very first video game art installation at their museum in Washington, D.C. And this is about 2010 timeframe. So I worked on that. We built a 6,000 square foot art installation that was amazing. And then it traveled the country for 3.5 years to 10 other museums, breaking all kinds of attendance records and kind of helping to establish the narrative around video games as legitimized art form, as the importance of it for protected speech and poetry and expression and all of these things. And then at that time, I had a little startup, was going in for funding over at Verizon, and they said, hey, instead of doing that, why don't you go on over here and help us with media and entertainment? So I spent 7.5 years at Verizon leading media and entertainment strategy, doing a whole bunch of crazy work there. And then the pandemic hit and we were all stuck at home. And I had friends over at AWS that said, well, now, you've gone through media and entertainment there and video game tech development and robotics and all of the kinds of crazy things. Come back to video games proper, come over to AWS and help us as we continue to build out in the world. And so that's where I've been for the past 4 years is AWS, continuing to focus on my love of the games industry and building technologies that help game developers just make better games, make more smiles, more moments of meaningful connection. That's it.
That's it. That's amazing. I mean, the whole history of what you've done as far as the Smithsonian Institute of having that video game culture into there. It's also working at other great companies and even startups to kind of show the whole gaming world as far as the art of it all, the storytelling, the way of how it connects with people. So it's just amazing how you're kind of finding yourself into these different places, but yet telling the same story as far as art, connection, people, and how that's evolving and growing. But what is it you enjoy the most as far as being a principal evangelist at AWS?
Well, the principal evangelist, I should explain, right? It sounds like this kind of nebulous title, right? It's an evangelist. So what do you get to do? I mean, really what it means is you're taking somebody who has spent 25 years, or not quite, but close, focused in and around the games industry. And so how do you take kind of that body of knowledge and what you've seen work, or not work, in the past, and then start making better decisions about what to do and understanding what kind of history repeats itself and that kind of thing. And so part of my role is to make sure that I'm bringing kind of the culture of the games industry into the company. So when we sit down to say, these are the areas we may want to focus on, does it align with the experiences that I've had? Does it align with where my friends that lead video game companies, where I believe their heads are at? And making sure that we are bringing in to the company the importance of the games industry. Why is it so big? Why is the average age for a gamer 38 years old? Why are women over 35 the largest segment of online players? Why are video games the number one form of content adoption of Gen Alpha, and on and on and on, right? So it's to bring the culture of games into the company. So as we're building these technologies for the industry, that culture is represented there. The second piece of that is the outward reaching from AWS to the rest of the industry. So they recognize that we recognize the history of the games industry, the challenges that they face, the fact that video games are still bespoke written pieces of content, unlike every other form of media, right? So if you make a video and you output it in a H.264 container, it works on every device that basically connects to the web and can play video. But video games still need to be ported to each one of those devices. So even though we're at a disadvantage from a distribution standpoint, when I say us, I mean the games industry, at a disadvantage when it comes to a distribution standpoint, it's still the largest form of media and entertainment in the world. Right. And so how do we make it easier for those games to get onto more devices? So again, when we sit down with our partners and our customers, they recognize that we understand the games industry. A lot of us come from the games industry that work here. And then the third piece is making sure that the voice of the developer is represented. So I take basically the proxy place of developers to say, I'm not sure if this works correctly, or, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we should be doing. So I get to represent that voice internally. And then I lean in to help, in any way that I can. My colleagues here with regard to media and entertainment and interactive technologies and immersive technologies and how we kind of help shape those opportunities in the world. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. So it's a very dynamic and exciting job. And, then the last piece of it is, I said there were three, but the side piece of all that is then I do pretty much all of the public outreach work. So on the AWS for Games channels on YouTube and Twitch, we do a live retro video game show every Friday. We do a live podcast every Friday as well. We do interviews with partners, interviews with game industry celebrities and leaders of the industry. We do technical dissections. We do interviews with game industry technology partners that run on AWS. So I get to do all of that production work as well. So yeah, there's a lot that I love about my job, right? But it's all for video games, something I'm super passionate about and is close to my heart.
That's awesome. That's a lot of moving pieces too. But it's also funny too that someone can walk by your office or anything and see you play games and be like, "Hey, are you really working?" Go like, "Well, yeah, I am actually."
Yeah. Yeah, well, what are you doing there? Well, I'm looking at the way this engine is working here and then understanding how technologies like Open 3D Engine, which started here, right, at AWS and then went to the Linux Foundation. Perhaps this is a good substitute for this type of an engine or for that type of game or for this utilization piece. So, coming from a part of my career, a good part of my career is in corporate strategy and really understanding how to build strategic frameworks. One of the important things is that you have to have time to sit and think. You have to have time to observe the technology and think through all the connecting parts or possibility space that technology can inhabit. And so, yes, sometimes it is literally sitting with a handful of games for a day and understanding the trade-offs that the developers had to make. How could we improve those things? How can we make them better for game developers? How can we move the complexity of technology out of the way so it alleviates those problems for them and they can just focus on building a better game, right? More art, more story, right? More engagement. So yeah, part of it is playing, but not to play, but to learn. Right?
That's awesome. I want to dive deep a little bit into that as far as like the
Yeah.
strategic partnership with the partners and stuff.
Mhm.
So when it comes to like a game that you may be playing for, or a game that they have, but you find yourself or what the community may find lacking, do you find with AWS services solutions that will help them elevate that, like to fix that issue, or as far as like other
Mhm.
services to be provided for, like what things may actually go into that, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's not about just pointing out the problem. Pointing out problems are easy to do. If you're pointing out the problem, you have to offer a solution. And the solution has to really tie into the problem you're trying to solve, not because it's a service that we have or something that's easy to sell. That doesn't create trust. That doesn't demonstrate how we are helping, not just game developers, but any customer in AWS to best operate their business, right? To grow their business, to engage their customers better, to provide better quality of service for their customers. And so it is about figuring out ways to improve the work that they're already doing, alleviate problems that they may have, right, and help them be better, right, as they go forward. So one of the big ones, like for example, we have a service called GameLift. And the idea behind GameLift is that if you're running a session-based multiplayer game, right, you're doing, an arena shooter, you're doing, an FPS with, 60 players or what have you. Those are session-based. So the gameplay only lives for as long as that game session is going. So rather than trying to figure out, okay, where's my audience really going to be? Do I need to go buy servers in these locations and countries? Am I going to co-locate some stuff in there? I'm just going to reserve time on servers all over the place and hopefully I get that mix right, only to find that maybe your assumptions were wrong. You're spending money that you didn't really need to spend. Is there a better way to do this? So what GameLift allows you to do is to take your game, deploy it on this service, and then when there's demand for a game session to start, it locates the server that's closest to the pool of players that want to go ahead and play together, starts up the game instance at that server right at the edge. Your players go ahead and play, and when it's done, it shuts down, and you only pay for the time that that server was in use. And so you're able to create the opportunity for lowest latency, highest performance, and cost-effective way of managing a global infrastructure that you don't own, right? And so again, it's taking those complexities away from the game development process and obfuscating that complexity through a simplified layer like GameLift and allowing you to have access to a global audience, meet your players wherever they are, and know that they're going to have, a low latency, high performance, secure, reliable gameplay session. Those are problems we love to solve for.
That's cool. And who wouldn't love that? Especially when
Yeah.
your game is so nice and not playing off a server at the other side of the world. And you're like, wow, this is why I'm doing terrible and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, back in the day, right, when we didn't have these kind of services, you would do things like rocket jump in games like Quake, where, if you have a really low ping time, you're playing against somebody that doesn't, there are ways to go and trick the physics in the system. So that way, if you have enough health and everything, you would jump from a certain height and fire a rocket into the ground, and it would launch you into the air, and you would kind of control yourself to land behind the player. But they couldn't see any of that interaction because of the lag time that they had that you didn't. So all of a sudden, you'd literally be behind your opponent and hit him from the back and win. And so, we didn't like that. And game developers learn all kinds of techniques to smooth those things out. Dead reckoning on the client side, overbuilding infrastructure, that kind of thing. But you want to focus on building video games, not dealing with the complexity and kind of, the eccentric components of managing global cloud infrastructure. That's what we do. Let us go and help remove that complexity so you can just focus on making a better game.
No, it makes sense. I wish some games back in the day, even going back to it, I know now your tips and tricks, and especially your arcade scores in the back there. I wish some games kind of like learn these things, but that's the fun of it all through the history. We go back and kind of learn a little bit what was not so great or what could we do better from then to now, such as, let me share my screen. There's one game system in particular that
here we go.
had one not so great score. So now we should be able to see it. The Nokia N-Gage.
The N-Gage. Yes, the side talking taco phone.
Right?
That's right.
cool as it was before the smartphone. You know, it's a
Hold on a
phone.
minute. Hold on. Do you
Oh,
know who created the meme of the side talking phone? It was a games industry reporter, and I believe worked at Game Development Magazine, Christian Nutt. So he was the first one to actually hold it up sideways and talk into it like that. And I believe that is actually true. So my game history friends will also correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe it was Christian Nutt who was in the picture there. So the N-Gage, yes.
yeah. I mean, such an innovation idea, if I can say it correctly, as far as
Mhm.
like having a phone and a game in one before smartphones kind of became more mainstream.
Yeah.
As far as just having doing all in one, but not many games were on there, and not many ways to kind of like interact like through a cable link, like with a friend, like how you would on a Game Boy, like you
Yeah.
can play Pokemon stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what they did, right, with and N-Gage at the time, and had a lot of friends that worked at Nokia that worked on the N-Gage and then the follow-on to it, which solved some of the initial problems, right? Was they said, hey, we recognize the games are being played on Java phones and they're being played on Symbian phones, right? Which was the operating system for Nokia handhelds. And they said, but the problem is that the keypad is really not conducive to playing those games. So what if we fashioned the phone to look more like gamers would expect a game controller? We'll have a D-pad on it. We'll have raised buttons for A and B on, I think it was 5 and 7 were the two buttons that were raised. And so you'll hold the phone like a game controller and you have this screen in the middle and you could play your games away. There were a couple of problems. First one was that it was a vertically oriented screen, right? It was a portrait screen instead of landscape. So when you're playing most games, side scrollers like Sonic, you would have bars on the top, so your screen would be really, really small, right? That was the first problem. Second problem with the original design, of course, if you're using it as a phone, which back then people were making voice calls on their mobile phones, unlike today where we pretty much don't do that. Um, you the speaker was actually located on the side of the phone, not on its face. So you had to literally hold the phone to the side like this, which is where we get the taco talking thing from. And then the third problem was to change the game out, which were just these little multimedia cards. You would have to shut the phone off, remove the battery cover, take the battery out, and there was the cartridge slot. Then you could swap. Then you had to put the battery back in and reboot your phone. Okay. Poor design, great intention, poor design, right?
Yeah.
And they had a couple of good games on there, right? And it did emulation as well. So, you know, for me, when we talk about, game systems that are terrible, I always find something to love about each one of them, right? Because they all tried to do something a little different, weird, and wonky. And the ones that we classify as being terrible, right? And so, you have to kind of look at it through the lens of what the world looked like at that time and what, technology evolution was going on and that kind of stuff. So I got nothing but love for all of it, right?
No, true, and you're absolutely right. There's always like these little quirks and stuff too. Like I think we talked about it before too, off camera, but definitely when it came to like the Dreamcast was one of my first systems that I had. But I thought it was so interesting, just like having that little screen within a controller and just playing with this big controller. And for me, I mean, I wasn't tiny or anything, but it was just like so hard to play around with. It was Sonic and other characters on it too. But I was just like, it was an interesting time to have that along with like other systems too.
Yeah, but I mean, look what the Dreamcast did, right? It invented and set forth all these things that we take for granted today, right? Visual memory unit on the controller, yeah, that's still something we haven't seen really replicated on a lot of other systems. But being the first console out of the box that could connect to the internet, yes. Browser on it, yes. Online multiplayer games and lobby-based systems in console, yes. There were other consoles, before it, like the Saturn, of course, and then even going back to the Genesis, actually even going all the way back to the original, like in televisions and stuff like that. They had cable systems where you could get these cartridges that you would plug in and you attach them to, a cable in your house, and then it would download those games from the cable provider, right? This is going all the way back, and even in the 80s with Nintendo and the Famicom in Japan and being able to do online banking and gambling and messaging in the 80s, right, on these machines. But the Dreamcast was one that out of the box, it was understood. This plugs into your phone. This connects to the internet. and it's kicking ass and it's awesome, right? And it's a great little machine. Great little machine. I'll give you one wacky one before we move on. There was an old system called the Adventure Vision by Entex. I believe it was Entex was the name of the company. And what the Adventure Vision was, it came out in the 80s, and it looked like a little portable arcade machine, and it looked like it had a screen in it. There were 4 games released for it. I think it was Turtles, Defender, Super Cobra, and Tiger Heli, something like that. There it is, the Adventure Vision. How the Adventure Vision worked was it didn't have a screen. What it had was a mirror that would rotate at 30 times a second. And then it had an LED bar on the side of the screen. And so it would turn off and on these red LEDs in synchronization with the way the screen rotated. And through your for your eyes to keep persistence of vision when there's light against a dark background, kind of like when you'd hold a sparkler right on the 4th of July and you're a kid and you're writing your name really fast in the air, you can see the trail. Using that component of human vision, it would look like you had this screen of pixels and it would be able to create a game. There was no CRT, there was no LCD. It was literally a row of LED lights with a spinning mirror, and then it would create this grid. But the problem is, it was so low cost that you'd constantly see like all the pixels for your ship would constantly be like wobbling out of alignment because of how cheap the mechanism is. Fast forward to the Virtual Boy, that is basically the same technology. They just did one in each eye.
Oh my God.
Spinning mirrors with these LED lights on the side, right? And so again, it's how do we take technology of the day and try to create this experience that is bigger than the technology that you had access to? That's the magic of video games, right? And so, yeah, man, you want to talk about systems all day long? I'm ready to go.
Right? No, I mean that's pretty much all I got was the N-Gage and the Dreamcast, but the Virtual Boy, that's a really cool one. I have a neighbor of mine that has one. I haven't seen it yet, just only talks about it. It's in the glass case and stuff. But I thought it was so interesting when first learning about like the VR, like the first like VR system, if you would, as far as like a game system, let alone coming from Nintendo too.
Yeah,
that they did that. And now just how they kind of advanced over the time when it came to like the Wii using motion controllers, like the nunchuck and the controller. And now even with the Switch, Nintendo Switch, now they just have the Joy-Cons is also doing the same thing too.
Yeah. Well, then the 3DS, right? Doing 3D without glasses. They figured out how to make a polarized screen. They were doing eye tracking on the newer ones, so they'd be able to shift that plane so that way, as you moved your head, it didn't break. If you remember the first 3DS, you had to sit right then in the middle. If you turned it at all, everything would start to get out of alignment. But the later ones were able to adjust for movement. And it was awesome. Now, there weren't a lot of games that really took good advantage of it, right? But again, it's all about continuing to move technology forward and find new ways to express art. It's awesome.
And actually, speaking of expressing art, here, there's one thing I want to talk to you about. I don't know if you remember this game, but it was quite famous with a very famous basketball player, Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh yeah, of course, Shaq Fu.
Yeah. And so this was actually, I looked online, I forgot what website in particular, this was actually dubbed as far as one of the worst games out there. But looking back at it now, it's actually pretty popular as far as like Steam or other like emulator systems that are using this kind of system to play the game. It's actually getting quite popular again. So you're just playing Shaquille O'Neal in Tokyo in another dimension, trying to save a kid. And it's just really funny. You're just playing as Shaquille O'Neal, just trying to tackle all these guys or kung fu your way to save the boy. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, look, but also now that we have some distance between it and you know more about Shaq, right? You're like, of course I want to play a game with Shaquille O'Neal, right? It called Shaq Fu. Or what was the name of the movie? Kazam? Or something like, right? Okay, yes, because that's who Shaq is. And here's the thing, right? For every game that comes out says, oh, it's terrible, there's somebody that's going to love it, right? There's somebody that's going to, even if they don't recognize it as a quality game, it may have had some special purpose in their life. It may have came to them at a time when, you know, they were They just needed, a new game, or they kind of sunk themselves into it, right? So, it's everybody's different, tastes are different, but objectively, is it a good game? No, but it's still great for what it is and what it tried to be, I think,
No, exactly. I think one in particular, like it's almost like when you see movies that are so bad, but they actually made it so funny and so good. I'm even trying to think of one. It's not The Interview, but it was one that had like a whole bunch of spoons in it, and it was "Hello, my name's Mark." I think it was like they called The Apartment or something. But regardless of that, there's one other game that's quite famous as far as like a movie goes, called Night Trap. And I think you
Oh
probably
yeah.
Oh, see, you turn your side, but I think it's funny as far as the gameplay goes, having like the actual cutscenes from the movie.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. Night Trap. So Night Trap came from a company called Digital Pictures, and Digital Pictures was founded by a Hollywood guy named Tom Zito. And what they did with Night Trap was, so before the Sega CD and stuff like that, Tom and some other folks, they had a system, a game system called the Nero, and they were pitching it to Hasbro. And it was basically the same type of gameplay. It was full motion video clips, and then you do chapter jumps, right, to be able to get to the different sections of the story and move it along, or you would die, right, that kind of thing. But it was all using a VHS tape. So it would have to fast forward or rewind to get to the section. So it was always a lot of load time, if you would, in between there. So they couldn't move forward with it, but CDs could jump very quickly to different sections, just like Dragon's Lair did, right? And that's all Dragon's Lair is. It's just a big cartoon with a bunch of cutscenes in there, and you push the joystick at the right time, and then Dirk Daring, makes the right pathway down the, the underwater cave and that kind of stuff. And so they said, hey, here's this new, this format of content distribution called CD-ROM. We can do all this kind of stuff to it. We can now do full motion video, which always made me laugh. It's like, if it's not full motion, then why would you call it video? Like it's partial motion video? No, right? It's video is full motion, right? So anyway, they had these FMV games, and it really it would just looked different than everything else that was out there. It was starring Dana Plato, who was from the 80s sitcom Different Strokes, right? And it was also the game that basically one of the two games was brought up in front of Congress that helped establish the ESRB, right? The Entertainment Software Ratings Board. That and Mortal Kombat were the two games that were brought up by, activist groups that said, oh, these games are going to, damage our kids and everything else, which of course they're not. And those were the two games that were like, oh, I can't believe that you've created this game. Nintendo famously said in that hearing that Night Trap would never come to a Nintendo machine. Of course, there's a port for it for the Switch. So you can go download Night Trap for the Switch and go play it today, right?
Hilarious.
Yeah.
What a blast from the past and everything.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time that we have so far as talk about games, your history, what you love about it, and what's come from your side, AWS Games, and so much more to see. I have a game for you that I want to challenge with you.
You got it, buddy.
Start meeting chat.
All right. Let me see here. Now, I don't know if you're going to keep this part in, but we had recorded a similar session before, and we were playing rock, paper, scissors, and I dominated that game, right?
You did.
Because I'm an older gamer, right? Is that what you're saying? How dare you?
No, you just got the skills. You get the skills more than me that pay the bills.
Skills to pay the bills, man. I always hear that in Professor Farnsworth's voice. Does he have skills to pay the bills? All right, this is what we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to play a little tic-tac-toe.
You know it. X's and O's.
Sure. We're doing a grid size 3 or 4 or 5.
We'll do 3.
All right, so we're going to do that. I'm going to join the lobby here.
I'm sharing screen too, just so we can all witness what happens here.
Sure. Absolutely.
Oh, my turn. Okay.
Oh, I'm player O, apparently. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
It's a tie.
My turn again. I'm going to
Mhm.
mix it up here. Another tie.
I almost grabbed a different square because I wasn't paying attention. All right, let's see. What do we
All
got?
about speed, really. Dang. I was hoping you didn't go for that one. Let me see.
Did you let me win that?
No.
Oh, there we go.
Good. Let's see.
It is a tie.
It is.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, here we go. One more.
What to do? Yeah, what to do? Sudden death here.
And it's a tie. And it's a tie.
You won.
Here's what I do love about the fact that we're playing tic-tac-toe. So another game-related kind of story or recommendation, right? So there is this brilliant game designer and programmer. His name is Raf Koster. And Raf, longtime game industry fellow, but he's a real Renaissance man. He plays guitar and he plays some more obscure like stringed instruments. He's a poet and he writes music, he writes books, he does all this great stuff. And he worked on the original Ultima Online, right, which really established the massive multiplayer genre of games. He was then the chief creative officer at Sony Online Entertainment, where he was leading Star Wars Galaxies, right, from the creative side of it. And he's had a variety of different companies. He has a new company called Playable Worlds, which runs all on AWS. And it's this massive, crafting and open world simulator. Really, really amazing. Raf wrote a book that I consider to be like one of the top 10 books in the games industry that you have to read if you're in it. And it is called A Theory of Fun. So Raf had given this book, well, before it became a book, it was a presentation that he'd actually given at the Austin Game Developers Conference. I believe it was like 2004. I have a copy of the actual presentation deck. That was when I had first met Raf. And in Raf's book, he really dissects what is fun? Why do humans see certain things as being fun, others that they don't? And how do we kind of encapsulate activities into larger order bits and all these kinds of things? And one of the things he brings up is tic-tac-toe. He said, when you're a little kid and you start to learn to play tic-tac-toe, it's awesome. Because with a pencil and a piece of paper, you could just draw a pad anywhere, or you can just create it on the table, and you could jump right in and you start to play. But then why do you stop playing tic-tac-toe? You can't win.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't win. Because what happens is the joy is in discovering the patterns and your brain figuring out how all these pieces fit together within the rules that you give it. And once you have discovered the answer, then it just isn't exciting anymore. It doesn't have the same draw because you know how to move it to a fail state or a stalemate state. And so it's really interesting. We think about what gameplay loops are and why in modern game development, if you want a real long tail opportunity for the kind of content and art and story that you create, having information about how your players are playing so you can constantly delight them with new moments, right, of interactivity, new things that they hadn't experienced, new challenges to overcome is what keeps them in there. And so when we think about, and we take this now again all the way to modern game development, we think about developing in the cloud. It's not about your game, running and streaming out of the cloud. That's not only what cloud game development means. It also means using things like live ops services and pulling things like telemetry data to understand how players are playing. And then all of a sudden, let's say an obstacle in a map, the vast majority of players are having a problem with it. They may go back in the next day and that obstacle is suddenly easier or has been removed or has been changed because the developer is now able to see how people are playing, go make those changes, you patch it out. Now all of a sudden the gameplay is better for everybody. And so it's really amazing. And I again, I do love the fact that you picked this because it's one of the stories out of this book, A Theory of Fun by Ralph Koster. Brilliant book. Definitely highly recommend you go pick it up. Anybody that wants to understand the psychology of play and why play is enjoyable for humans. He uses this as that perfect example of awesome when you learn it, terrible when you figure it out. And yeah, as you can see, we just keep hitting those ties. So
You keep doing it until you won, like just last time.
yeah, but I
called me
didn't
out.
win because
Yeah.
you didn't know the rules. I won because we're moving fast and you're just not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right. Could be like speed chess, which a couple days ago from this recording was International Chess Day. But
Yeah.
even that, I'm just sticking with checkers and tic-tac-toe and all the easy stuff. That's just me.
Well, the Queen's Gambit certainly went ahead and turned everybody's brains back onto chess, right? Not everybody. I mean, so many of us grew up learning to play chess and you played at different points, but it really ignited this whole passion around chess again, which was great. It's a wonderful game.
Or Blue Scooty when it comes to Tetris. I beat that high score.
Yes, yeah. And I took I wrote a nice piece on LinkedIn about, there was some controversy around that of a reporter kind of denigrating his win and saying, if I was a mother, I'd tell him to go outside and get some fresh air. I don't know how much of an accomplishment this is. And I was like, well, maybe. And then I just listed out like 20 different, maybe she wasn't aware of this or aware of this or aware of this. And that kind of blew up on LinkedIn, right? And where it comes from is not from a place of, I think, maliciousness. When we talk about people that criticize the games industry, it comes from a place of not understanding it, right?
Mm.
Of the industry still only being 50 years young. And for people to, we continue every year to kind of dispel the, the stereotypes around games and these sorts of things. Playing games is fundamentally part of being human. And if you go back and you look throughout entire recorded history, civilizations that marked and cataloged, right, their existence, they write about the games they have. I mean, the oldest games like euchre and stuff like that, these are games that were depicted in, Egyptian hieroglyphics from thousands of years ago. And there's an old saying, right? If you want to understand a civilization, look at the games that they play. So playing games is part of being human, and not just human. Like pack animals play with each other to figure out where their kind of ranking order is and how to survive in the world. So video games are just an extension of what we have always done. But the best part about them is that the medium is different than every other form because it only exists in digital form. It doesn't exist in the real world. So we can do things that are so fantastical within it that present itself as an alternative universe to the one we exist in that make it so much more compelling than just about every other art form that we've got. And as we continue to learn how to best utilize video game technology and frameworks to better each other, to create better experiences, right? To lean into everything from medical imaging to education, it's only going to continue to get better and better and better over time. So, she was that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, well, video games. Yeah. Oh, well, video games. Everybody plays them. So yeah, keep playing.
Right? Especially when you see people on Twitch playing them too, and you're like, oh my God, they're playing it full time and doing all this. And
I love
until
it.
the day that Nintendo or Game Freak or whatever has a Pokemon like right here, I mean,
Yeah.
until I play that, I mean, that's gonna be really cool. I mean, yes, I got the AR on Pokemon Go, but you know what I mean? Like if I
Yeah,
could
but many
actually
people shut that off, right? Because what it's about is the simplified mechanic of just using your thumb to swipe a Pokeball at a Pokemon and get it, right? It's awesome. The one, since you brought up Twitch, I'd also say too, I would get people that would ask me, why would anybody watch somebody play a video game? Why don't you go play a game? It's like, well, why do you sit down on your couch and watch somebody paint the bedroom of their house on Home and Garden television? Get up and go paint your bedroom. Or watch somebody play football on TV. Go get a football and go outside and play with your friends. Like, you're watching hours of people buying homes from the comfort of the home you bought. Like, why? Because it's not about the act of buying the home. It's the drama. It's the people involved, right? It's the whole process. It's the same thing with watching people play video games, right? So yeah. And sometimes, when you illuminate that for people, they go, oh, that makes sense. I didn't realize that. I didn't think about it that way, Yeah.
It does. It makes sense. And I want to end it with that note on making sense and just having us to realize the whole history of this. And I want to also mention down below in the description, I'll have all the links and channels on Chris with AWS Games and anything else he wants to share out to the whole audience here.
Awesome.
Be free and make sure to subscribe to, because every Friday there's always something he's going to be doing. So it's always cool to watch and see.
That's
just
right.
Last Friday, what he'd done was MS-DOS games, and that was really fun to do.
And it's live, right? So sometimes stuff doesn't work, and so you just got to talk and work through it. Getting MS-DOS games to run effectively on modern hardware can be a challenge. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do this week, but it may be games that push a console to its limits, right? So which games really, from a graphical perspective, from a technique perspective, just squeezed every bit of juice right out of the machine. So we'll probably play through 3 or 4 of those on Rewind, which is on the AWS for Games channel. So man, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I blame CrowdStrike for the MS-DOS. Not kidding. But anyway, but thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your time. This was really fun. And eventually I'll find a game that I'll be good at. But yeah.
Oh, stop it. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you too. And thanks so much for having me on. It's my pleasure.